You don't belong in this cabin. Turn around and walk back to where you came from." The words landed in the quiet of the boarding bridge like a slap nobody saw coming. The woman standing in front of seat 2A did not flinch. She did not raise her voice. She simply looked down at the boarding pass in her own hand, then back up at the flight attendant blocking her path, and said nothing at all. That silence would cost 3 people their careers before the plane ever left the ground. To understand how a Tuesday morning at Charlotte Douglas International Airport turned into the most talked about 17 minutes in American aviation that year, you have to rewind 6 hours back to a glass-walled boardroom on the 11th floor of a building on South Tryon Street, where the ink on a $3.8 million acquisition was still wet at 3:52 in the morning. Alexis Monroe had not slept in 2 days. At 36 years old, she was the founder and sole CEO of Sterling Dynamics Logistics, a freight and supply chain company she had built out of a 2-bedroom apartment in Winston-Salem 11 years earlier. That night, after 14 months of quiet, brutal negotiation, Sterling Dynamics had completed its acquisition of Crestwind Regional Airlines, a mid-size carrier known for its small fleet of luxury charter jets and a single flagship route between Charlotte and New York that catered almost exclusively to the ultra-wealthy. Her lawyers had popped a bottle of champagne nobody drank. Alexis had asked for black coffee and a car to the airport. All she wanted in the entire world was to board her flight, recline the seat, and sleep for 2 hours before landing at JFK for a 9 a.m. press conference she hadn't even had time to prepare for. At 6:10 that morning, she walked into Terminal E wearing a gray zip-up hoodie with a small, cracked University of North Carolina logo on the chest, faded from what looked like 100 washes. Her hair was pulled back in a low knot. She carried no designer bag, only a battered brown leather messenger bag that had belonged to her father, and around her wrist a thin braided bracelet made of frayed nylon cord, the kind you'd find on a hardware store keychain rather than in a jewelry case. That bracelet mattered more than anything else she was carrying that morning, though nobody at the airport would ever think to ask about it. 26 years earlier, her mother, Deborah Monroe, had spent 7 years working the tarmac at Crestwind as part of the ground crew, loading luggage and de-icing wings in the freezing dark before dawn. Deborah had made that same bracelet for herself out of leftover cord from the supply closet, back when she still believed hard work at that company might one day turn into something more than a paycheck. It never did. Deborah was let go without explanation. 2 weeks after she filed a complaint about a supervisor who refused to let a black ground crew member use the employee restroom reserved for senior staff. No severance, no apology, just a termination letter and a company that erased her file so cleanly it was as if she had never worked there at all. Alexis had worn that bracelet to every negotiation for 14 months. When the papers were finally signed at 3:52 a.m., she had allowed herself exactly one private moment in the elevator down to the parking garage, where she pressed 2 fingers to the frayed cord and said, quietly, to no one, "We got it back, Mama." She told none of this to her lawyers, her board, or the press. She had learned a long time ago that some victories are quieter and more dangerous than others, and this was one she intended to enjoy in silence, from the inside, before anyone in that company realized who was now signing their checks. At the Crestwind First Class Pavilion, a private lounge behind frosted glass doors reserved for the airline's wealthiest clientele, a young concierge named Trevor glanced up as Alexis approached the desk. His eyes moved quickly, the way eyes do when they've been trained to sort people before they've even said hello. The hoodie, the scuffed sneakers, the absence of a Birkin bag or a Rolex. "I think you might be looking for the main terminal," Trevor said, his tone syrupy with the particular condescension reserved for people he'd already decided didn't belong. Economy check-in is back through those doors. Second left. Alexis placed her boarding pass and passport on the marble counter without a word. Trevor's smile stiffened as he read the name. He typed. He looked again. Something in his posture folded slightly, like a man realizing he'd misjudged the weight of a box before trying to lift it. "My apologies, Miss Monroe," he said, in a voice that suggested the apology was for the inconvenience of correcting himself, not for the insult itself. "You understand, we don't typically see passengers in first class dressed." So, casually, she said nothing. She took her documents and walked into the lounge, found a quiet corner seat, and closed her eyes. She had exactly 50 minutes before boarding, and she intended to use every second of it. What she did not know was that a very different kind of arrangement was already being made at Gate 14, one that would turn her 50 minutes of rest into the last peaceful moments she would have for the rest of that year. At 6:40 a.m., a black SUV pulled up outside the gate's private entrance, and Marcus Halloway climbed out mid-sentence, already barking into a Bluetooth earpiece about a short position that had gone sideways overnight. Halloway was 51, the founder of a hedge fund called Ridgeline Capital, and a man who had flown Crestwind's flagship route so many times that the gate staff treated his arrival the way palace staff might treat a king's carriage, with a mixture of relief and dread. Because his moods dictated everyone's morning. He had no reservation on that flight. He rarely bothered to make one. He simply expected a seat to appear, the way hot water appears from a tap, because in 11 years of flying Crestwind, one always had. "Diane, I need 2A, he said, snapping his fingers at the gate agent's desk without breaking his phone call. "Whatever's happening today, make it happen." Diane Wexler, the flight's senior purser, had been with Crestwind for 19 years and had built her entire professional identity around one skill: making wealthy, difficult men feel like gods. She strode toward the gate counter, heels clicking sharply against the tile, radiating the calm efficiency of someone who solved problems by making them disappear rather than by making them fair. "Who's currently ticketed in 2A?" she asked the gate agent, a 26-year-old named Renata Cole who had been working this counter for less than a year. Renata checked her screen, a Ms. Alexis Monroe. "Paid full fare 3 months ago, no corporate account attached, no VIP tags." "Never heard of her," Diane said. "Bump her. Tell her there's an equipment change or a system glitch, whatever sounds official. Move her to premium economy if business is full." "That's a fully ticketed first-class passenger," Renata said carefully. "Involuntary downgrades without a documented operational reason could violate." "I don't need a lecture on Federal Aviation Code at 6:40 in the morning, Renata." Diane's voice dropped an octave, the practiced tone of a woman, used to being obeyed without argument. "Mr. Halloway is a corporate partner who has personally referred 4 board members to this airline. I am not having him scream at corporate because some nobody with no status tags is sitting in his seat. Move her. If she complains, hand her a travel voucher and smile." The decision took less than 30 seconds. Nobody in that conversation paused to wonder who Alexis Monroe actually was because, in Diane Wexler's world, a woman in a faded hoodie with no luxury luggage was, by definition, nobody worth wondering about. At 6:52 a.m., boarding for Flight 214 to JFK was called. Alexis walked down the private jet bridge, messenger bag over one shoulder, already half dreaming of the flatbed seat waiting for her. When she reached the door of the aircraft, Renata scanned her boarding pass. The scanner let out a sharp, unmistakable beep, and the little screen flashed red. Renata's face rearranged itself into practiced sympathy. "Ms. Monroe, I'm so sorry. There's been a complication with your seat assignment." "What kind of complication?" Alexis asked. Her voice was flat, without heat, the voice of someone who has spent a career learning that anger tips your hand too early. "An unexpected equipment change," Renata said, the lie sliding out smoothly. rehearsed just moments earlier. We've had to reassign your seat. We can offer you premium economy and a travel credit for the inconvenience." Alexis tilted her head slightly. This aircraft is an Embraer E195. Crestwind operates 4 of them, and none of them have alternate first-class configurations. There is no equipment change. Something flickered across Renata's face. Surprise, maybe even a flash of shame. Before Diane Wexler stepped into the doorway behind her, all sharp cheekbones and sprayed blonde hair, radiating the particular disdain of a woman who had decided, long before this conversation started, exactly how it would end. "There's no need to make a scene," Diane said, looking Alexis up and down with a slow, deliberate contempt that lingered on the hoodie. "Seat 2A has been reassigned to a VIP passenger. You'll take premium economy, or you won't be flying today at all." "I paid $9,400 for that seat," Alexis said quietly. "I'm not sitting in premium economy." "Then you're not flying," Diane said, and for the first time, her voice carried real venom. "This is Mr. Halloway's flight, and frankly, I don't have time to explain airline logistics to someone who clearly doesn't fly this cabin often enough to know how it works." Behind Diane, heavy footsteps thudded down the jet bridge. Marcus Halloway pushed past without so much as glancing at Alexis, still shouting into his phone about a margin call, and dropped into seat 2A like it had always belonged to him, because in his mind, it always had. Alexis watched this unfold with a stillness that unsettled everyone around her more than shouting ever could. Something inside her sharpened into focus, not rage. Something colder and more patient than rage. She recognized Halloway immediately. 2 years earlier, his fund had tried to short Sterling Dynamics into bankruptcy during a supply chain crisis, spreading false rumors to tank the stock before Alexis countered with a maneuver that cost Ridgeline Capital $412 million in 48 hours. Halloway had never once seen her face. Their entire war had been fought through filings and press releases. To him, she was invisible. That was about to become a very expensive mistake. "Fine," Alexis said softly. "Take me to my new seat." Diane's mouth curled into something close to triumph. "Right this way." She marched Alexis through the cabin like a public demonstration, past the mahogany-trimmed first-class suites, through business class, into the cramped, overstuffed rows of premium economy, where a toddler screamed 2 rows back, and a man beside the window was already unwrapping a foil-covered sandwich that smelled sharply of tuna. "Seat 27C, Diane said, gesturing at the middle seat with a flourish of false hospitality. "Enjoy your flight." Alexis stood in the aisle for a long moment. She thought about her mother's 22 years on the tarmac outside this exact terminal, hauling luggage in sub-zero wind, at 4 in the morning for a company that discarded her the moment she asked to be treated like a person. She thought about the frayed cord bracelet on her wrist. She thought about the messenger bag on her shoulder, which held, among other things, the finalized transfer documents proving she now owned every gate, every uniform, and every aircraft on this tarmac. She did not sit down. She turned and walked back up the aisle. A young flight attendant tried to stop her at the curtain. "Ma'am, you can't." She kept walking, through business class, through the curtain into first, straight to the doorway of Suite 2A, where Diane was pouring champagne with the satisfaction of a woman who believed the matter closed. "What do you think you're doing?" Diane snapped, slamming the bottle down hard enough to rattle the glassware. "Get back to your seat immediately." "I'm going to my seat," Alexis said, and something in her voice made the cabin around them go very quiet. Passengers in nearby rows lowered their phones. Even Marcus Halloway looked up from his tablet, irritated at the disruption to his peace. "You are causing a disturbance," Diane hissed, snatching the interphone off its cradle. "I'm calling the captain." Within seconds, the cockpit door swung open, and Captain Gerald Voss stepped out, a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with 4 gold stripes on his shoulders, and the posture of someone who had never once been told no in this cabin, and did not intend to start now. "What exactly is the problem, Diane?" he asked, his voice booming with theatrical authority, clearly meant to be heard by every row within earshot. "This passenger was reassigned due to operational necessity," Diane said. "She's refusing her seat and harassing Mr. Halloway." Captain Voss turned his full attention on Alexis, stepping close enough that she could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "Listen very carefully," he said, lowering his voice into a growl meant to frighten. "I am the final authority on this aircraft. My word is federal law the moment those doors close. If you do not turn around and walk to your assigned seat in the next 30 seconds, I will have you removed in restraints, and I will personally ensure you are placed on a no-fly list at every carrier in this country. Do we understand each other?" Alexis did not step back. She did not blink. She simply reached into the pocket of her hoodie, pulled out her phone, and pressed a single contact. "Who could you possibly be calling?" Voss barked. "Put that away right now, David," she said calmly, as the call connected on the first ring. David Ferris, her chief operating officer, was still in the Charlotte boardroom finalizing press language for the morning announcement. "Alexis," David said, alert immediately. "You should be asleep. What's wrong?" "I need you to initiate Ledger 0 on the Crestwind employee roster," Alexis said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent first-class cabin, every word deliberate. "Immediate credential suspension, pending review, effective the moment I say the word." Captain Voss let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Ledger 0. Is that supposed to frighten someone? I don't know what delusion you're operating under, but you work for no one on this aircraft, little girl. I fly for Crestwind Regional Airlines." "You flew for Crestwind Regional Airlines," Alexis said. "As of 3:52 this morning, Crestwind Regional Airlines belongs to Sterling Dynamics Logistics. And I am Sterling Dynamics." Marcus Halloway, still half listening from his seat, barked out a short laugh of his own. "Just call security, Gerald." Woman's clearly having some kind of episode. Alexis turned her gaze on him for the first time since boarding. "Is that concern from you, Marcus? Considering your fund lost $412 million, trying to short a company you never bothered to understand." The color drained slowly from Halloway's face. He stared at her, recognition dawning in slow, sickening waves, the specific horror of realizing you insulted someone whose name you should have known cold. "You're Monroe." "Sterling Dynamics Monroe, I am," she said. "David, give me the timeline." 9 minutes, David said through the phone. "I need 9 minutes to route the acquisition confirmation through the FAA operating certificate transfer and notify the board." 9 minutes, Alexis repeated, and hung up. The cabin fell into a silence, so total you could hear the auxiliary power unit humming faintly through the floor. Nobody moved. Diane's triumphant sneer had curdled into something uncertain, though she was still clinging to the last threads of her authority. Captain Voss stood rigid, jaw locked, refusing to let the doubt creeping into his stomach reach his face. "This is absurd," Voss finally said. "You expect me to believe the owner of this airline is standing in my galley in a thrift store hoodie? Diane. Page Ground Security. I want this woman removed before I finish my pre-flight checklist." "Right away, Captain," Diane said, though her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the intercom. Alexis walked calmly to the empty seat across from Halloway, sat down, crossed her legs, and waited. 9 minutes. She intended to spend every second of it watching the walls of their arrogance come down brick by brick. At minute 2, Diane's calls to the gate desk went unanswered. At minute 4, the cabin lights flickered once, a small stutter nobody but Alexis seemed to notice, though she knew exactly what it meant. Ground power being reassigned, systems being locked, credentials being frozen in real time from a war room 3,000 miles away. At minute 6, the reinforced cockpit door swung open again, and First Officer Ethan Cole, stepped out holding a tablet, his face pale, his hands slightly unsteady. "Captain," he said, "you need to see this." "Not now, Ethan, Captain." Ethan's voice cracked with an urgency that finally made Voss stop. He turned the tablet around. On the screen, a business news alert had just gone live. Sterling Dynamics, Logistics Compult's acquisition of Crestwine Regional Airlines. Founder Alexis, Monroe Namam Sol, CEO, effective, immediately. Captain Voss read it once, then again. The blood seemed to leave his face all at once, the practiced authority in his posture collapsing like a tent with its center pole pulled out. Holloway, still frozen in his seat, fumbled his phone out of his jacket and dialed, with shaking hands. "Simon. Simon, pick up. I'm on a Crestwind flight, and there's a woman here saying—" The voice on the other end was audible, even from several feet away, thin and defeated. "If you're on a Crestwind plane right now, keep your head down, Marcus." The board folded at 4 this morning. Sterling Dynamics owns every asset. Monroe owns all of it. Holloway lowered the phone, slowly, staring at Alexis as though seeing her for the first time in his life, which, in a sense, he was. At minute 7, Diane's radio crackled with static, and she jumped, nearly dropping the handset. "Renata, why isn't the gate desk answering?" Footsteps pounded down the jet bridge. Renata Cole burst through the aircraft door, clutching her tablet to her chest, face bone white. "Captain, the entire gate terminal just went dark. My badge won't scan." A red banner locked my screen. It said Ledger 0, credential suspension, effective immediately. The silence that followed had weight to it, the kind that presses against your ribs. Captain Voss turned back to Alexis, and for the first time, his voice lost all of its manufactured thunder. "What have you done?" "I removed a liability from my fleet," Alexis said quietly. "The same way you would remove a mechanical fault before it brought a plane down. You just happened to be the fault." At minute 9, exactly on schedule, the cabin lights dimmed to emergency power, and the low hum of the auxiliary unit died beneath their feet, replaced by a silence so complete it felt like the whole aircraft was holding its breath. Ground control had just pulled power. Nobody in that cabin was going anywhere until Alexis Monroe said so. Diane Wexler's composure finally broke entirely. She sagged against the galley counter, her sprayed hair suddenly looking brittle and small, and when she spoke, her voice shook in a way it never had in 19 years of commanding this cabin. "Ms. Monroe, please, I have 2 kids. I have a mortgage. I was only following protocol for a VIP passenger." "You didn't follow protocol," Alexis said, standing now, her voice carrying the calm, terrible finality of a verdict already decided. "You looked at a woman in a hoodie and decided her dignity was negotiable. You broke federal passenger protection rules to flatter a man who wasn't even ticketed on this flight. And you did it in under 30 seconds because some part of you believed you'd never have to answer for it. You were wrong." She turned to Captain Voss. "And you used the full weight of your authority to threaten a paying passenger with arrest, not to protect this aircraft, but to protect your own ego in front of an audience. That is exactly the kind of rot I intend to remove from every gate and every cockpit in this company." Heavy, synchronized footsteps echoed down the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority officers, flanking a Charlotte Douglas security supervisor, all moving with the unhurried certainty of people who had already been briefed. The lead officer, a broad man named Sergeant Daniels, stepped into the cabin and scanned the first-class section before his eyes landed on Alexis. "Ms. Monroe, we received a priority notification from Sterling Dynamics regarding revoked operational credentials for 3 individuals currently aboard this aircraft." "That's insane," Voss said, his voice cracking now, all thunder gone. "I've flown for this airline for 22 years. You cannot walk me off my own aircraft." "Sir," Sergeant Daniels said, without an ounce of sympathy, "our system shows your operating credentials were suspended 6 minutes ago. Under federal aviation regulations, You are no longer authorized to occupy the flight deck. I'll need your company identification and cockpit access badge." Voss's hands trembled as he unclipped his lanyard and set it on the counter, staring at Alexis with an expression somewhere between fury and disbelief, unwilling, even now, to admit he had done anything wrong. "You ruined 22 years over a seat assignment." "No," Alexis said. "You ruined it the moment you decided a uniform gave you the right to threaten people. I only turned the lights on." Renata Cole burst into tears immediately, apologizing over and over to the officers, desperate not to be arrested, refusing to even meet Alexis's eyes. Diane Wexler moved more slowly, her hands shaking so badly, she dropped her badge, twice trying to set it down. When she finally looked up at Alexis, there was no anger left in her face at all, only the naked, cold arithmetic of a woman realizing exactly what she had thrown away in less than a minute of contempt. "I am so sorry," Diane whispered, and for the first time, it did not sound rehearsed. "I don't know why I looked at you and decided you didn't matter. I've done that my whole career and never once thought about it until right now." Alexis studied her for a long moment. She thought of her mother's termination letter, the one that arrived without a single word of explanation. She thought of the bracelet on her wrist. "That's the first true thing you've said to me all morning," she said quietly. "Hold on to that thought. It's the only thing that might save you from becoming exactly who you were about to be." She did not forgive her. She did not offer her a job. But something in her voice, cold as it was, left room for a version of Diane Wexler that might someday become someone different. Marcus Halloway had not moved from his seat this entire time, sinking lower into the leather with every passing second, trying to make himself small in a way that men who have never once needed to be small do not know how to do gracefully. "Alexis," he said finally, when the officers turned toward him, "let's not be hasty. We got off on the wrong foot. I can be a valuable partner going forward. I have connections that—" "You have nothing I want, Marcus," Alexis said. "You're banned from every property Sterling Dynamics owns, every subsidiary, every charter service, effective this moment. If you attempt to set foot on one of my aircraft again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing, and I will make sure every business journalist in this country knows exactly why. You can't do that. I have a meeting on Wall Street in 2 hours." "Then I suggest you start swimming," Alexis said, and nodded once to the officer standing beside him. By the time the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate, 40 minutes late, First Officer Ethan Cole had been given emergency command as acting captain, and a young flight attendant named Priya Shah, only 24, and working her first year with the airline, had been handed the purser's radio with hands that shook from nerves rather than guilt. The cabin that had been suffocating with tension just an hour earlier now felt lighter than air. Passengers quietly exchanging glances that said, without words, that they had just watched something long overdue finally happen. 4 hours over the Atlantic coastline, Alexis woke to the smell of coffee and the quiet hum of a cabin that no longer felt like a battlefield. Priya approached her seat carefully. "Ms. Monroe, I just wanted to say, thank you. I've watched Diane treat people like that for a year and never said anything because I was scared of losing my job. I should have said something a long time ago. You're saying it now," Alexis said. "That's what matters." She opened her laptop and connected to David on a secure line. His face appeared, tired but electric with adrenaline, the war room behind him, a blur of monitors and shouting analysts. "The story's everywhere," David said. "Cell phone footage of the crew being walked off the plane leaked 40 minutes after we pushed back. It's the top trend on every platform. 90% of the public reactions is in our favor. But Halloway's PR team is trying to spin it, claiming you had some kind of breakdown mid-negotiation. Send them the cabin intercom recordings," Alexis said. Every word Diane said to Renata about bumping me, every threat Voss made on that jet bridge. Post it with no caption. Let the recordings speak. Within the hour, the recordings hit every major outlet. The narrative flipped entirely within a single afternoon. Holloway's own public relations firm dropped him as a client before the markets even closed. The Federal Aviation Administration opened a formal review into Captain Voss's conduct, a review that would end 4 months later with the permanent revocation of his commercial license for abuse of authority and violation of passenger protection statutes. Diane Wexler and Renata Cole were both let go. Their names quietly circulated through the hospitality industry in a way that made new employment almost impossible to find, a consequence neither of them had ever imagined possible in the 30 seconds it took to make their decision that morning. 6 months later, Alexis stood at the podium of a small conference room in Charlotte, the same terminal visible through the glass behind her, now rebranded with Sterling Dynamics colors on every gate. Crestwind Regional Airlines had a new name, Monroe Regional Air, and a new company-wide policy that any employee, from gate agent to captain, who denied a passenger dignity based on appearance would be terminated on the spot. No exceptions, no appeals to seniority or connections. Diane Wexler had written her a letter 3 months after that flight, a long, unpolished one, admitting exactly what she had done and why, without asking for her job back, without asking for anything at all except to say she was sorry, since replaying the sound of her own voice, telling a gate agent to bump the Croft woman, without even bothering to learn her name. Alexis never wrote back, but she kept the letter in her desk, because some kinds of remorse deserve to be witnessed, even when they cannot be rewarded. Captain Voss never wrote anything at all. He spent the months following his license revocation, giving interviews insisting he had done nothing wrong, that the entire incident was a media conspiracy against a 22-year veteran pilot, right up until the FAA hearing, where the recordings were played publicly, and even his own union representative stopped defending him partway through. Some people, it turns out, would rather lose everything than admit they were ever capable of being wrong. On the first anniversary of the acquisition, Alexis flew Monroe Regional Air's flagship route one more time, alone, in the same faded UNC hoodie, the same frayed cord bracelet on her wrist. Priya Shah, now the airline's youngest senior purser, greeted her at the door with a warmth that had nothing rehearsed in it at all. "Good morning, Miss Monroe. Coffee black, the way you like it?" "Perfect," Alexis said, and settled into seat 2A, the one that had once been taken from her in 30 seconds by people who never bothered to ask her name. She looked out the window at the tarmac below, at the ground crew loading luggage in the gray morning light, and thought, for just a moment, of a woman who had done that exact job 26 years earlier and never once got to see this view from up here. She reached down and touched the bracelet on her wrist. Just once. The way she always did before takeoff. If this story moved you, not because of the ending, but because you recognized someone in it, someone who was once looked at and quietly decided they didn't matter, press like so it reaches someone who needs to hear it today. Share it with anyone who's ever been underestimated in a room they had every right to stand in. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been on either side of that jet bridge? I read every single one.